Hello, welcome to Make More Noise interview series. As ever, please like and like down there, and if you haven't already subscribe. I'm really happy to be joined by a woman, Jesika Gonzalez, who is the founder of the Turf Collective, and she's going to be talking to me a little bit about their group and any actions they've got, and we're just generally going to have a little chat about activism and all things in between, really. Hi, Jesika.
Hey, how are you, Katie?
Yeah, not too bad. How are you?
Fantastic. Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate every time I get to talk to you. That's really great.
Cool.
I love your work. We love your work that
Oh,
you're
thank
doing.
you.
We love
Yeah.
your protests. We love your show. We love everything. We're huge fans of yours. We really appreciate you. Thank you so
Oh,
much for everything you do.
fantastic. Well, I think thank you for all you do. I think we've got kind of on a similar vibe of kind of grassroots organizing, kind of based jumping off social media platforms to try and make something a little bit more like cogent and realistic and based in real world activism. Can you give us a little bit of background about the Turf Collective and how that came about and what you guys are up to these days?
Sure. So the Turf Collective was just an idea I had at random to get all the turfs from Turf Book. That's what I call our little corner of left book. Get us together and get us talking. Get us
Mm-hmm.
talking face to face spaces because I've noticed that we have a hell of a hard time communicating really well with each other because we're talking all the time in the groups and on each other's posts and everything on Facebook, but we're not really doing it well. We end up having a lot of problems and a lot of falling out and a lot of scrapping with each other in the threads, a lot of friendly fire. And I thought we could minimize some of that by sitting like you and I are talking now in face to face, in a face to face setting, even though, of course, it's remote. But even just talking, even over a video, changes everything from talking to each other over the threads on Facebook, over text, where we can't really get good texture. We can't see each other. We can't hear each other's voices. So we lose a lot and we have a lot of misunderstandings.
Yeah.
Um, and a lot of sisters, I guess, felt the same way and felt the need for that sitting in sisterhood with each other,
Mm-hmm.
especially those of us that are isolated geographically from each other. So that's why
Yeah.
we've become so popular. So a lot of sisters turn up. We do that twice a week, every week. We sit just like this, and the
Mm-hmm.
room will fill up. I mean, there'll be 40 plus women on a call, any given call. And we do that twice a week, every week. And so far, it's been really successful, and I'm really happy. And so are the sisters. They get a lot out of it. I couldn't be happier.
Yeah. I think it's a really neat idea because I think whilst on the one hand I think the internet, like I don't know if the fourth wave, fifth wave, I don't know what wave we're on at the moment, but I feel like it's really been empowered. A lot of consciousness raising is happening online. And it is fantastic in that way because you can connect with people all over the world. But at the same time, there's a really worrying toxicity to some of the discourse, and I think we've both been guilty of this. I know I can hold my hand up and say I've been a total twat on a thread sometimes. Some of it just gets you up the wrong way, or you get into a disagreement and you're like, "Who's this?" And suddenly you get a little notification. You're like, "Right, you, come on."
Oh, yeah.
you know and yeah, it's quite easy to be a bit mean and not really yourself. Like you wouldn't say that if you was in the pub with somebody, you wouldn't speak to them in that way, but because there's a little bit of a disconnect and you can almost feel like you're just arguing with an avatar online.
Right, exactly. So when we come into the calls and we talk to each other face to face, it's a completely different thing. Not only
Mhm.
you with each other, but then you have all these other sisters on the call that are observing. So it becomes a little bit like a tribunal, you know what I'm
Mhm.
saying, too? And
Mhm.
they kind of help check the conversation that's going on and keep everybody honest.
Mhm.
It's really good. I mean, it's really good vibe in those spaces, even though we do sometimes platform some really difficult conversations. You know what
Mhm.
I mean? But we stay at it. Every sister, we come back every time. We come back every time. And over time, that only strengthens the bonds. And I think that it can only help strengthen the movement. You know what I'm saying? I think it's good.
Do you have women who are from like a specific political background, or is it quite a cross-party environment where you've got women from all the political spectrum?
Well, the group, we do seek to promote radical feminism, and we view radical feminism as a leftist ideology. At the same time, however, we seek to create a space at the table for all TERFs. So we do have TERFs that are not RF, that don't meet the radical feminist part. They more keep that to themselves. I guess I would say, like, they know, they can read the room. So we are happy to include all sisters, but we're not happy necessarily to platform every single idea every sister has. So, like, out in the field, I'm happy to stand shoulder to shoulder with a sister that happens to have, say, a pro-life view. You know, it's not one I share, it's not one I support, but that doesn't necessarily make her a bad, like, person. And we'll stand shoulder to shoulder out in the field doing an action or doing a protest if we agree on certain things.
Well, I think it's really fabulous to see, and I think actually radical feminism is missing a trick. I think there's a lot of women on the right who would be open to the message that radical feminism puts across. It's relatively socially conservative. I think radical feminism, from my understanding, I think it can be anti sort of hypersexualization. There's like lots of crossover with not just opposition to the sort of transgender agenda, but things like surrogacy, prostitution, you know, and maybe if we can build up these connections, then maybe we can have really interesting conversations, and that analysis that we've built up over years, they can take and inform their understanding and their idea, you know, their opposition to sort of similar things. You know, I think there's a real opportunity there, and it's great to see this sort of spaces like this being created, which allow us to sort of connect and to, like you say, have the discourse.
Yeah, there are some really interesting conversations that can be had. I think, especially around the discussion about abortion, for example. Like, there are some really nuanced places you can take that. A couple of at the beginning of October, a group of us, not necessarily just all TERF Collective, but it was myself, Kara Dansky was there, Lauren Levy was there, Peggy Lures was there. This is Peggy Lure's sign from that protest. We went down to DC in October.
Yeah,
and we were spreading the message of TERFdom. So we gave out these pamphlets that the TERF Collective just made. And there I met a group of women who were like leftists and they were radical feminists. But believe it or not, Katie, they were standing on the anti-choice side. They don't support abortion. They're pro-lifers, but they still consider themselves feminists. And they had a whole like different way of viewing things. Like they really are a lot of different ways to see things. And just because a woman is pro-life doesn't necessarily make her automatically anti-feminist. And I think, I love when we come together and we can discuss and we can really like be vulnerable and share what it is, our thought process is, and analyze all the different chains of that, as opposed to we're over text, we're like, no, you hate women and you're a male supremacist because you don't believe in choice. And, you know, these hard black and white lines that really don't serve us. They don't serve the sisterhood. They don't serve the fight against patriarchy. You know, at least we talk to each other like that. So, yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly.
It's nice, like you say. I think abortion is such a nuanced debate that it often just boils down to choice good, you know, anti-abortion bad. But I think there's lots of nuance in the discussion. You know, femicide, how can you account for girls being murdered before they're born? If you sort of believe in freedom of choice, that would be you can choose to abort a baby for whatever reason, you know, like that's an uncomfortable thing. Would you put them two together? You know, like I heard somewhere in Malaysia or some one of these countries, initially the feminists initially opposed abortion being extended in the country because they were worried about the impact that it would have on the female birth rate, and I think it's
Yeah.
nice that we can have a conversation like that, because it is interesting, and too often I think not just in leftist spaces but in all spaces that everything's just cut down and simplified into like quite an easy message that often like you do lose a lot of nuance, and a lot of historic conversations that have been had over the years are just sort of erased a little bit from the collective memory, and it's
I see abortion as a very necessary harm mitigation strategy personally, like my personal view, not Turf Collective, not American Rad Femmes at all. Jesika Gonzalez's personal view is I see it as a very necessary harm mitigation strategy. But at the end of the day, what is abortion if nothing else other than a way to mitigate the harms of male sexual access to women? You know what I mean? So there is so much room for discussion there. And that's just like a portal to go in and talk about so many other things. And we really blunt the conversation by keeping it black and white. And I think we do ourselves a disservice.
Yeah, I mean, I'm aware as well. Like, I come from England, we've had abortion access for about 50 years, and there's nobody looking to remove those rights. And I think it's quite a different. It's easy for me to pontificate about these things when I have full access not only to abortion but to all forms of birth control for free through the NHS. How is it in America at the moment? We heard about the Texas abortion ban. Are there moves to remove abortion more broadly? And is this something that the Turf Collective are sort of concerned about or worried about or activating about?
So on December 1st, there is going to be the Supreme Court is going to hear arguments in a case that could stand to possibly overturn the Roe v. Wade decision, Roe v. Wade being the case that gave us access to abortion in the first place legally and safely across the country. So they are relitigating it yet again in the year 2021. We are still at the fight. In this fight, we're still not in the clear. We still don't have that behind us. So here in the States, it is quite different than it is where you are. Here it is a continuous struggle. And we're still protesting and fighting just even those basic things all the time. It's a little bit unsurprising in Texas, right? Because a southern state, I don't know. I'm assuming even you guys out there know about how it is over here, that, the South tends to be more conservative. So for us, it doesn't surprise us so much there. But this is a national problem. Like, once it gets to the Supreme Court, it stands to harm every woman in the country. So we are still at square one, as far as I'm concerned, even with that.
What are some of the ways that you're thinking to fight back? I mean, are there protests planned, and is there are you going to go representing the sort of the turfs as it were? Like, how is?
Well, Turf Collective isn't assembling anything down there or anything. We expect that there will be mobilization efforts around that down there in DC in December. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah. What have been some of the actions that Turf Collective have put together? Are you working yet to do activism, or are you more just in terms of connecting women at this point and providing those weekly sessions where women can have the discourse and, I guess, do consciousness raising, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. Thank you. Yeah, consciousness raising. Yeah, so almost a little bit. We do a little bit of CR, I guess I would say. But sure. So the Turf Collective, to me, my vision for it would be a place to bring together women that are remote and disparate, right? So spread across this really gigantic country, everywhere from the South all the way out to like Alaska and Hawaii. And now the Turf Collective actually has members from all over the world. I mean, so we have women on our calls from London. We have women on our calls from Australia. We've had women on our calls from the Philippines and Singapore. We have everybody on our calls. And what can all these women do, spread from all over the country and all over the world? So one of the ideas I have is to leverage the fact that we're spread out all over the place and empower the women that come to our calls with the ability to do actions wherever they are, right? That they can work as independent cells and they don't even need another sister if they don't have one, right? So like you and I, we love to go out and protest. So like this is from a protest in July. This is from the protests in October. But what about sisters that don't have anybody else and don't have the ability to go out and hit the street? That's why we come up with things like this. So our paper protests, these are ideas that I had. Like this is a flyer that I came up with. I mean, one of our sisters, Zanetta, actually designed this and put it together. But it is to protest. In the United States, we have a major store chain called Target.
Okay.
And Target stores, there's 1,900 of them in the country. They're in every state. They're in a whole bunch of cities. And in Target stores in 2016 decided they were going to shift to a gender-neutral bathroom policy, meaning that anybody could use the bathroom of the gender with which they identify. All right. So for people with the special identities, as Amy Souza likes to call it. And so I came across a study one day, just in surfing the internet, that actually shows that there's been an increase in sexual assault incidents at Target stores since they implemented this bathroom policy. So I thought, well, wouldn't it be great if the women that shop at Target and the women that work at Target knew that there was this increase? So I thought, well, let's sticker or pamphlet or something inside the Target store so that the women have this information. And that's where this idea came out of. And so now we've had all over the country, we have women going around taking these little leaflets. We print off batches of like hundreds of them at a time. We fold them into 4s and we put them in every pocket of every women's clothing item in the store. So whenever a woman goes to shop at Target, she gets the opportunity to come home with one of these flyers that tells her that this is happening. And then you have a QR code that leads you to the study. And the website that hosts the study also has a lot of additional peaking information. So, you know what I mean? It's just like a good little remote consciousness raising campaign. There's a lot of women that can't be out. Like I am out and turfing on Maine. Like this is my birth name that I use and this is who I am. But a lot of women, for a lot of different reasons, don't have that liberty. So this is a good way for them to get involved. And a lot of women are really excited that they have the opportunity to participate in that way. Then recently, we also came up with a whole pamphlet because a lot of women were asking, you know, a lot of women, especially our international sisters, don't have a Target store that they can hit with those flyers. What about something for us? We want to be able to participate doing leafleting. So we came up with this whole comprehensive flyer. I mean, pamphlet that really talks about all the issues.
Okay. Yeah, I like that.
From transition and detransition to AGPs in the bathroom. Here's a whole panel on the We Spa. I mean, it's got everything. It even talks about like what the difference is between intersex and gender identity. I mean, this thing is packed full of information. Any sister anywhere in the world can print it. I think over there you would use A4 paper. I'm not sure. But you can print this wherever you are and drop it wherever you want. We have a sister just not even 40 minutes before I got on this call with you. She was posting pictures of herself. You know what she does? She goes into the bathrooms and she puts them in, you know, the changing tables, the infant changing tables.
Oh, yeah.
You can stick them anywhere. You can stick them under a car windshield. You can stick them anywhere. And this is just, you know, information that women and just the general public, like even men, need to have. And especially, you know, capitalizing on the word turf. Dave Chappelle just made this a household word. He like did all this heavy lifting for us. Like, let's capitalize on that. So this is shit any woman anywhere can do. That's kind of my angle. That's my approach to our activism, is empower every woman anywhere.
Yeah, I think one thing that's been really successful in the United Kingdom, especially at the beginning, was just sticker wars, you know, like people, I don't know if you've ever heard of Sticker Woman.
No.
She was well, nobody actually knows who Sticker Woman was. But they basically went around putting stickers everywhere, and basically triggered a lot of people. Hang on, let me try and find. I've got something here. So yeah, this is. I've not got the sticker. Hang on. There's basically a sticker that says women don't have penises, and this really triggered some people. Some sisters in Liverpool put a sticker up on a statue, but in Liverpool, and in response, the Lord Mayor of Liverpool decided to unanimously remove all of the single-sex toilets in council-owned property in revenge for the evil sticker woman, which is absolutely insane. This fella, by the way, is known to let his paedophile friends give him information when they're getting dodgy. Like, he's a proper dodgy character. And it might be a little bit of a, like, what's the word, backlash. Like, maybe it seems insane to me that would give somebody the justification to make a move like that. But it shocked me how sort of jarring little things like this can be to the right people, and it's just such a small thing, yet it seems to engender such rage. Has anybody reacted negatively to your stickers and given you a bit of free publicity about it?
Well, believe it or not, Katie, we just had a sister that was taken up on hate crime charges. And luckily those charges she was released of those charges. But yeah, she was, the way Marianne Millar and some of the other sisters out that way are being prosecuted and persecuted. We had one as well. And her name is Thistle Patterson. And she's the founder of WLRN. I'm sure you've heard, Women's Liberation Radio News. She's a strong sister in our movement. And they suspected her of having placed a Turf Collective sticker on a magazine box somewhere in Madison, Wisconsin. And so they actually brought her up on charges for that. They brought her up on hate crime charges for that. Luckily for us, in her jurisdiction, there is no hate. The gender identity isn't recognized as a category for a hate crime in her jurisdiction, but there are jurisdictions in the United States where that is recognized as a category for a hate crime charge. So we do have to be very careful here, even in the United States. And one would have thought we did have First Amendment protection, but it seems like maybe we don't. Luckily, it didn't come to pass that she had to pay with any kind of a criminal sanction for that. I don't know who put the sticker. We still don't know who actually put the sticker. They found a Turf Collective sticker, and she is heavily persecuted in her town for being somebody that holds what we call, gender critical or radical feminist views. So yeah, we do have that threat hanging over our heads here in the States, and it can be quite serious depending on where you are and what it is that they think you did.
Yeah, it feels like a really arbitrary thing, and I mean, putting up a sticker, I think I've Googled it under law. It can be classed as vandalism, but you can just take it off. And I think it just goes to show the state that we're in, where little small acts of sedition or rebellion can carry such heavy burdens on people in a really arbitrary manner, because oftentimes they don't necessarily go for a figurehead. Sometimes it can just be a random person that happened to say something on Twitter, and now suddenly you've got entire police forces getting them up on jumped up charges. I mean, it's interesting times we're living through. Have you got any advice for women who are looking to get involved and to get involved with the Turf Collective, or in general do activism locally?
So if you like our paper protests, come to our Twitter account. Check us out there. We keep our paper protest pinned. So the Turf Collective pamphlet is pinned up there. And any woman anywhere on the globe can extract that file from our Google Drive, can download it, print it, and place it wherever you you think that information is needed and where it needs to go. If you're interested in us and our activism, you can email us at turfcollective@gmail.com. We're kind of a clandestine group, and we like it that way. We're not trying to we're not trying to compete with the other major groups that do actual, legal and upfront advocacy and lobbying or anything like that. And we keep our protests to these remote paper protests at the moment. We may in the future start doing actions in our own right, but that's not exactly what we're doing now. I personally am working on guides and things to strengthen our movement in the United States. So I'm putting together my own documents on what makes good protests, because I have been leading my own independent protests. So that's what I'm working on, and that's what we can offer. So if sisters are interested in beginning to do a little bit more what we call here boots on the ground work, certainly shoot us an email at turfcollective@gmail.com, and we'd love to talk to any sister that's interested in getting in touch with the movement and getting involved, and we'll do everything we can to help connect you to other women that you should be connected to, or give you whatever information we have that could be of value to you.
Yeah, that sounds really good. I think one thing that is so difficult, even in the UK, where we've been turfing out for 4 or 5 years, is finding those networks and having those networks stay and not become, I don't know what happens. I feel like sometimes certain people take over them, and then suddenly they become about a different thing to what they originally were, and it's quite difficult to maintain those connections. And also because everybody's so worried about being outed, where if you're a member of the wrong, if you think the wrong thoughts, then you can lose your entire livelihood. It's a worry for people, this sort of need to stay anonymous versus the need to sort of maybe come out, as it were.
Right.
I mean, what do you think about that tension between those who are in the public eye and those who have to remain anonymous? Is it possible to do activism without being in the public eye, and just to do things in the background, like you say, the actions with the little papers and things like that?
That's what I would encourage women that really are afraid to do and to start with. We had a sister that just she was at a meeting that we had yesterday, and she put her very first sticker, and she was telling us about how she was shaking. And then we had other sisters jump in and tell us, yeah, the first time I did it, I could do one. And then I scurried away and I was shaking the rest of the night. And it gets easier and it gets easier and it gets easier. So what I would tell any sister within the sound of my voice is be braver today than you were yesterday. Okay? And maybe you can't come out with your name today, but take a step. Put up a sticker, put out one flyer, put out one pamphlet today. Tomorrow, see if you can challenge yourself to do it again. You got away with it yesterday. See if you can do it again tomorrow. See if you can top yourself tomorrow, and be braver every day than you were the day before. And I think if we do it that way, we will all get there. That's what I think. That's my advice.
I think it's hard to, especially if you are sort of dipping your toe in it. I think, can't all be out there. Even if you are very, very brave, if you're not in the position to come out for whatever reason, with your job or your position being in jeopardy, I think that's the nice thing about these sticker actions and other things. There's so many things that need doing all the time, and even letter writing. I think I'm a bit more of a gobshite, let's just, I don't know. let's do those sort of actions. But I think also just as important are the more suffragist actions, like writing to your MP and exerting your energies in terms of the formal structures, as it were. What are your feelings in regards to the best way to make political change? Do you understand you have I still think we still have the same split, I think, from back in the suffragettes times. Is you've got the suffragists and the suffragettes being the more formal traditional, let's change the law type of activists, and then you've got the suffragettes who kind of see the law not really working and see the corruption inherent in the system and think that the best way is to tear it down or to disrupt the system in some way. Where would you say you fell in that spectrum, and what sort of led you to that position on the spectrum, as it were?
You know, Katie, you're going to be disappointed because I'm at a moment right now personally where I'm having a hard time, and I've been more, and I tend to be more destroy the system type.
Mm-hmm.
But lately, you know, I have been giving time and energy to, you know, women's human rights campaign and
Mm-hmm.
efforts like that, because, you know, at the same time, we are facing a battle that is legal and is, you know, it's slowly encroaching on our
Mm-hmm.
daily lives right now. And we do have to beat that back, even though I am interested in a bigger collapse of the system, a bigger attack of the system. I mean, that's what makes us radical feminists, is an acknowledgement that that the patriarchy is not working for us. And these structures and systems are not working for the women of the world. But right now, I'm caught personally in a hard place because it feels like first things first, almost to me right now. You ask me again tomorrow, that answer might be different. You know what I mean? So that's where I am. That's where I am right now. Right now, I'm caught between both worlds. That's where I am with that.
I think sometimes we can almost fall into camps, and I think especially if you are a suffragette, you don't necessarily always get the public support of some of the more well-to-do women who are, I think, more concerned with, I have to play this game and I have to do it in their way, because if I don't do it, then I'm not going to be able to get into the powerful rooms where decisions are made. And I worry some, like a bit unfairly, because I think a lot of work is boring, writing to your MP, petitioning, fighting within the system. And I think sometimes we both appreciate what the other one does, but I don't think we often like let it be known, kind of thing. I think this can sometimes be a bit of a tension. I don't know how you feel is the situation in the United States of America, because I'm not really in the ins and outs of how the I don't like the turban community, as it were. Do you think you have got quite strong links between the sort of the more formal suffragist types fighting for the legal changes and the grassroots activists who are sort of going around stickering and generally being a little bit of a fly in the ointment of the powers that be?
I would say at the moment, because the community is so small, we have no choice but to be one and the same. So I don't see a tension, Katie. Maybe that is something that exists over there, but over here, I mean, sure, we have sisters that want to dedicate their time more to lobbying than they do to stickering, but they probably do both lobbying and stickering. There just isn't that much room to be splitting off like that. We just don't have the people. We have to kind of all stay together. So, and that actually right now is kind of a good thing, that we all have to work together because we are such a small community, for whatever that's worth.
I think I don't know. I think it will come in the future. It's quite an interesting thing to see, because like we've we had like a really frenetic time when there was lots of will, and now you can see how groups have developed. Like you've got specific groups with very got the LGBT Alliance, and then you've got a group like Safe Schools Alliance, Transgender Trend. Each of the groups kind of has its a focus, which I think has allowed women to sort of fit in to where they want to fit in. And so it's really cool for me to sort of watch America, since I guess it's like Biden's executive order seems to have really spurred the creation of new groups, and I can see things spinning up,
right,
coming up. It's really exciting for me to watch this from across the pond. You know what I mean?
But can I ask you a question then? Would you say that in your community, women stick to one group? Because what I've noticed here is we're all pretty much in all the groups. Would you mind answering that?
I think we do sort of switch around. There is a lot of crossover, and a lot of people are, it's a very similar community. But I think a lot of the groups, the groups that I know of, I mean, a lot of the time it is just a couple of core people who do a lot of the sort of the work of it. It goes to show, I think, a lot of how much you can do with a couple of really dedicated people who have been the backbone of some of these organizations. I think there is quite a lot of crossover. And people do go backwards and forwards, but I guess it's good as well, because if you're lesbian or bisexual, you might want to focus on that aspect of it, whereas if you're a parent and a concerned parent, you can go into sort of Safe Skills Alliance, use those resources, those skills. It depends on, I guess, what you want to get involved, what you want to spend your time advocating on behalf of. And I think we do have quite an identity politics obsessed society. And so it is good for the people who are being affected to have a group that they can go in and work, with those peoples to those aims. Yeah. So it is really good. And again, I think a lot of it does come down to personalities, the sort of people who will be the suffragists, the sort of more formal, well-to-do, more formal, and then you've got all the sort of scrappy people on the outskirts, on the periphery. But I think we need both of them, because one of them is pushing open the doors and the other one is pushing open the space to have conversations and to allow them to be reputable. When you do have some more rambunctious people on the side, it's like, so not a threat exactly, but it's like, you can deal with this proper group because they're, and we're kind of a little bit like the heel of the gender critical movement. Well, I like to think about it a little bit like that.
Sure. Yeah. But I'm saying, I feel fortunate here that in the States, at least right now, we don't have a huge chasm between the suffragist types and suffragette types. We are certainly we're nonviolent through and through. And that's really it. Besides that, women that don't sticker, don't judge women that do, women that don't lobby, don't judge women that do, and et cetera, because we're all in one fight, and the whole goal is just advance the struggle. And we're learning to not struggle so much with each other. Sometimes we have trouble with that, and we work through that, but we're learning to fight the bigger fight and not turn our fire on each other.
Yeah. Well, I must say as well, like in general, I do think I don't want to create a false impression that we're all just sitting on sides, seething at the other side.
Oh no, of course, no.
And I do think that there is, but it's inevitably as things go on. I think this will be something that will happen organically, I suppose, as well. Like, you don't know what the future's gonna hold, and what legal challenges and groups are going to form from all this activism. And a group like yourself, I think you can maybe hopefully be a little bit of a melting pot and a networking site within which those groups can come to fruition. What's your background in terms of activism? Have you been an activist before, or are you like newly minted? What's your history? How did you come into turfism?
Yeah, I call it turfism. I call it the gospel of turfism. Yeah, so I had a pretty standard background, I would say. Well, maybe or maybe not, depending on who you ask. But let's see, where do I start? So I did go to law school. I went to school straight through. I grew up in New York. I grew up in Queens, New York. I ended up going to college in Buffalo, New York. While there, I stayed on and completed law school while I was there. By the time I finished law school, I actually finished law school at the height of the subprime crisis.
The credit crunch.
Which hit in 2008. I graduated in 2009. So we were still in very deep recession that rippled throughout the legal community, as well as, of course, the finance community. So the job market was really crappy. And then soon after that was Occupy Wall Street. So that's where I really would say that although I have had, a kind of a anti-authoritarian streak an inclination towards justice and things like that. But Occupy Wall Street, I would say, was the first like real time I got to be involved in activism directly. I went every day, but I went more as an observer. So I was like a participant observer. That's the way Thistle put it when we spoke. So that was my first real taste of activism. After that, that movement died down. Of course, I still had the ideas in mind, and that energy reinvigorated after Bernie Sanders ran for president in 2016.
Okay,
So I became kind of a Bernie bro, it was called.
Yeah, we had the same thing. We had a similar thing with Jeremy Corbyn. Like,
with Jeremy Corbyn.
Hope, you know, I was Corbyn. I wanted him to. I was, come on, Jeremy.
Since then, though, I have to admit, I have completely fallen off of Bernie Sanders, and I consider him a shill. I consider him a total plant. I consider him a total Democratic Party plant. But out of the ashes of that, we were having a lot of conversations about agency and self-determination, and that's how I came to being a TERF. Is a recognition that trans-identified males are not the same as females. Like, it was just a thread that led from agency and self-determination out of conversations that we're having out of that were being had out of the ashes of the Bernie bro leftist collapse. So that's how I came to this here. And that's more or less my history in activism. I was never an organizer before now. I was a participant before now. I was somebody that believed in leftist principles before now, but I unfortunately was a liberal feminist until about the year fall of 2017. That's when I peaked again around ideas of agency, and that's how I got to where I am now.
I think liberal feminism is the great gateway drug into radical feminism. I don't like it when women call any woman a handmaid, because I just feel like maybe they're just starting out on the journey, and you kind of go through. It's like, I feel like a lot of the liberal feminism does lay the groundwork. A lot of the conversations about power and consent and you know, who has the power are very much the same across the board. They just don't seem to understand that trans women are men, which I just find a bit okay. But you know, I think to its credit, it's like a nice fluffy, socially acceptable type of feminism that I think can help us sort of inform what we're doing. But it's whether or not you get to a certain point and there's like a cut off, isn't there? Like they say, oh, don't be a TERF, don't be a SWERF. And some of us, I think, just push through that and go, hang on a minute, though, wait a minute, what? What sort of conversation? So you mentioned there were some conversations about who was getting centered the Occupy movement. Was this Occupy Wall Street?
No, this is way post Occupy and post the collapse of the Bernie left. Then we started, people were talking about agency and self-determination. We were having a lot of conversations about Black and Indigenous liberation and empowering Black and Indigenous communities. And that's when we started talking, everybody still is, we should center Black and Indigenous women. And a lot of people were saying we should center Black and Indigenous women and femmes. And that's really where I would say I peaked, because I thought to myself, well, what is a femme? And why does a femme, I guess, is anybody that identifies as feminine, I guess, and that can include males and it could include females, but males, regardless of their performance of femininity or inclination towards it, are not exploited for their reproductive role and function, nor are they as exploited for recreational sex by other men, the same way, of course, women are. And so I would say no, if we are trying to seek to liberate all of humanity, we shouldn't center necessarily feminine men.
Do you know what, that really reminds me actually of something that when I was peaking around that time, I was watching it was a BBC News program that is like a weekly like politics program, and it was a bit rubbish, like late night Thursday night. But I remember one of the conversations that really helped to spur me on my way was they were doing an International Women's Day. It was International Women's Day, so they was doing an International Women's Day special. But to talk about international women, to talk about women, they got some like camp gay bloke who was like, "Oh, I'm here to talk about what it's like to be a femme." And this entire conversation, and there was like one female panelist, and they got through the entire conversation before the host actually went, "Oh yeah, by the way, what do you think about it?" And she was just like, "Are you mad? Have you none of you noticed that you haven't and like it's interesting
So
to
I
see
guess you saw it too, huh?
I did, and I was
You
like,
saw it too.
what is this? Because I know that gay effeminate men don't have an easy ride of it, but they're not women. They're not women. They're not women. It's offensive and homophobic to suggest that they are women, because I'm sure that's the sort of bullying line that was taken their entire life.
Absolutely.
And it just doesn't make any sense. And I think that it's the forced teaming, isn't it, of women and men to sort of to break down the movement, I suppose. I mean, what do you think about? I know that this is one thing that Dave Chappelle's the closer in one of the arguments he makes is maybe I don't know how much he goes into it, but basically that this transgenderism is a way for straight white men to reassert their dominance in these sort of discourses around power and especially around Black liberation.
Oh, absolutely.
It sounds like that is exactly what happened with yourself when they just sort of tacked on a group and just said femmes, and that was a way. I mean, it's obviously you've left that community now because you just thought this isn't a ridiculous and not.
Well, I still certainly fancy myself a member of the struggle for Black and Indigenous liberation 100%. Unfortunately, yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because Dave Chappelle really did tease out something very, very important. And that is that the struggle for Black and even Indigenous liberation, with the co-option of the term two-spirit and all this other weird stuff that they're doing, is a co-option of that, and also a co-option. This is also the same co-option that has happened with intersectional feminism itself, where it seeks to supplant Black and Indigenous women, the most oppressed and exploited people all over the globe by white male supremacy, and supplant them and their agency and their struggle with men, white men that wish they were women or feel like they want to be women or dress like women. Is very hard. I don't have a frame for understanding trans-identified males. But yeah, that's exactly what it is. And Dave Chappelle is exactly right. And I think that our big struggle going forward, certainly something I think a lot about as being a member of those racialized communities, is how will I tell my sisters? How will I tell them that this scam is being run on us? And I think that a lot of, especially, working class and poor women all over the world, you're going to have a very hard time convincing, say, the Black women of Africa or South America, or, just all over the global South, that men that like to wear dresses are women, and are women just as much women as they are, or are women that are more exploited and oppressed than they are. So we do have that on our side, but it is going to be a struggle to convince our racialized women that are involved, say, in liberal feminism, that this is a problem. That's my next hurdle, I think, for this upcoming year. That's a problem that I'm really thinking a lot about. And how do I bring those sisters into the fold and get them involved on the right side of the struggle?
Yeah, this is something that I really struggle with, and it is the apparent success of these men who have managed to convince a lot of Black and brown women that their struggles are simultaneous, and that we, opposing men's rights to self-identity, also somehow oppose their rights to claim womanhood, or that we are all racist somehow. I think it's the sort of this bundling together of all of these liberation movements. I mean, what do you think is the success of this movement in terms of speaking to the experiences of Black women of color, and how can we combat it? Have you got any thoughts on this matter?
Actually, yeah, I think, and I do tell women in our community, and a lot of women, I think, don't take this as seriously as they should, unfortunately, that that side speaks in the language that we recognize about our struggles. And that's why it's successful. And I think a lot of spaces in the GC movement, as it were, really scoff at the notion of Black and Indigenous liberation. They scoff at the notion of racialized oppression. And so women like me, they don't want to hear it. They're not going to feel welcome in a space where there are women that are just kind of casting it to the side. Although I do agree that, we should join together in a fight for female liberation. We really can't create an alienating space. And I think the success on their side, well, first of all, is money. That's undeniable. But they use their money to do a lot of pandering and to do a lot of deploying the language of genuine oppression and the need for a genuine liberation across all those different axes upon which we are oppressed, unfortunately to say. And I think it would behoove us in our movement to get some fluency in that language and be able to speak about those things a little bit more.
Yeah, hang on a minute. I'm just taking you in the hallway because my girlfriend has just got back from work and she's not got her keys with her, which is taking a moment. Yeah, I think I see what you're saying, and I can see these issues also, and it is a concern. And I'm also, I feel like all of this, the battle itself has created this real fatigue when it comes to like anything to do with identity politics.
Yeah.
That a lot of women are just sort of, they've had it for a long time and they're just like, I'm not playing this language game anymore. I don't want to do it anymore. What do you think of that aspect? To what extent is this debate creating it, making it really difficult for us to advance these other causes? Do you think it's creating almost like a backlash against all liberation and all political correctness?
I think you're absolutely right. I think there is a fatigue that's happened. And I certainly empathize with that. Like, I understand that, right? I have the capacity to understand why some women would be like, they're just like exhausted with having to deal with these issues. They're very confused. They don't know what's right and what's wrong. They don't know when somebody's trying to pull the wool over their eyes. But I think the answer to that is to keep coming together and keep coming to the table and not just throw your hands up and not just walk away. Listen to each other and communicate with each other, because we do need each other. For my part, I'm going to continue to try to do more outreach to other women that will listen to me and see if I can bring them in. But we're just, we have no choice. We are stuck in a rough spot and we just have to keep communicating through it. There isn't going to be an easy way and there isn't going to be an easy answer. We're just going to have to keep talking to each other and listening to each other and trying to acknowledge each other's needs. Though I do certainly understand and empathize with a sense of fatigue, but there's just nothing that's to be done about that. If we want to join together to liberate all the women of the world, racialized women make up the majority of the women of the world, and that's just a fact.
Yeah, like it's a real shock. I think 70% of the world's poor were women, and I imagine a large proportion of those will be women in the global south. And I guess it's quite difficult. We're already fighting in our own countries to maintain our rights, and we can sometimes forget that it is a global struggle, and that we do need to keep that focus on some of our activism. But I mean, hopefully spaces like the one you're creating with Turf Collective can help to bridge those gaps. I think a lot of the issues with discourse comes with online formats and that whole dehumanization that happens, and hopefully having a more personal space where everybody, like you say, they're accountable. Then you can't just go shooting off at the mouth and calling somebody nasty names when they're like sitting there in front of you and you've got 10 people watching what you're saying, you know. What is the plans for the Turf Collective coming up? Have you got any ideas for the future? What actions you want to do? Where do you see the Turf Collective being in a year's time?
Well, right now those are the conversations that we're having right now. As I like to tell everybody, Turf Collective is something I founded, but it's not something I like control. So right now, as we speak, we're having conversations about that. And I think that right now we're kind of settling on, we love to be a turf headquarters. We like to be turf HQ. And that's kind of how we're keeping it right now. We're keeping it like low key. We're keeping it informal. We're keeping it a place for sisterhood and for us to come together. And we like where we are right at this moment.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on and talking with me today about all this. It's been great to have a bit more time. You came on to one of our shows, but I think sometimes we've got so much to pack in that you end up getting a lot of the background in this back and forth. It gets kind of cut out a little bit, so it's really nice to have a nice long chat with you.
Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Okay, fantastic. You can find Jesika at Turf Collective online. I'll put some links in the description for if you want to follow up and find any groups in your local area. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please like down there on the little button. Just take a little minute, like the video, share it. Really helps to bring up the algorithms. And until next time, ta-da.
Turf